morning. Welcome to this morning's session. My name's Eileen Roden. I'm going to be talking to you about the launch of the final PMO Essentials certification, which is the PMO Essentials for PMO Directors. So just a quick introduction to me. My name's Eileen Roden. I'm one of the directors at PMO Learning. So I still get my hands dirty and do some training, coaching. I'm an author of a few books, conference speaking, and I think more interestingly, I'm also the chief examiner for the House of PMO certification. So hopefully as I take you through, we'll talk about what's included with a good understanding. So just a quick bit of information about PMO Learning. If you've not heard anything about us before, we are a training provider, but we're quite a niche training provider. Our focus is purely on teaching kind of the skills required to be somebody who works in and around a PMO. So we have all the different PMO certifications, along with other things like facilitation skills, benefits management skills, specifically looking at those from a PMO perspective. We do are insistent that anybody who actually does any training for us does have and has had a substantive role within a PMO. So you're actually talking about you've been trained by your peers, and actually a lot of our trainers are still in employment, and they just they work with their employees to have days off to do some training with us. So actually it has an awful lot of credibility around actually kind of their experience, and kind of what they're doing really kind of helps make the courses much more kind of practically based to make sure that they help you deliver. So this course is the latest one that's come from the House of PMO. It's the Essentials for PMO Directors. It's specifically aimed at people who are looking to move into a PMO director role, or if you've just recently been appointed into a director role. So anybody who's running an enterprise PMO might have kind of similar responsibilities. Anybody who's looking after a portfolio of change and is got PMO responsibilities within there. And often in organisations, we don't necessarily have somebody called a PMO director, but we have what I always say is the PMO manager. So it's basically the single person who has oversight of all of the PMO services that are provided. Now, whether that's in a single office or multiple offices, that's the course that this is aimed at. We also kind of recognise that if you're head of delivery, head of project or programme delivery, you may well in that role also include PMO services. So it's very much relevant for you as well. So we're going to kind of just talk a little bit about kind of the certification in context, so you can understand kind of why it was set up, where it's come from, and how it fits within some other elements of the House of PMO suite of products. So the certification is written and owned by the House of PMO. So they have written the exams and done all of the materials. We use APMG to do the formal examination. So it is accredited by an external body. So there's been a certain level of rigour and quality checking to make sure both the product and the exam is of an appropriate quality. So that also gives us a little bit of confidence. So for those of you who've not heard of the House of PMO, this is a new professional body, again focused specifically for people who work in the PMO. It was established last year by myself and Andy Scott to actually kind of create a home for PMO professionals, and the idea is that they'll provide, or House of PMO will provide some products and some services that will help individuals who want to work in a PMO actually kind of develop themselves, contribute to the development of others, but also the House of PMO is working really hard to kind of build the whole PMO profession. So you can find a little bit more detail there at www.houseofpmo.com. So over the kind of the last few years, even though it was only formally made into a membership organisation last year, it has been around for a long period of time, previously probably understood as PMO Conference or PMO Flash Mob, where it delivered community events. However, over the last kind of few years, it spent quite a bit of time doing a community project to develop a competency framework for PMO individuals. Now, both Lindsay and I have been very much involved in developing competency frameworks in organisations, but also in terms of project management competency frameworks. And we just, trying to kind of skew them to fit PMO people was just kind of wasn't really working. So the idea of having a PMO competency framework was that it was tailored specifically for people who work in the PMO. And that has generated then a book which has got 24 competences now across 4 different domains. So within the PMO competency framework, we recognise P3M admin. And although there's lots of people who fight against PMOs doing admin, we do recognise that we do admin. However, we do an awful lot more than just admin. And you can see the other 3 petals of the competency framework, the other domains, we do significantly more than that. We do P3M delivery support, which is all about supporting project and program managers in helping them deliver their projects and programs. PMO management, and I have to stress that PMO management competence is not about managing the team. That PMO management competence is about actually managing the PMO, so being able to kind of design and set up, run, transform and close PMO, so through the whole life cycle. And then we also have another domain, which is P3M enabling, which is all of those kind of infrastructure elements that we need to put in place in order for projects and programs to deliver successfully. So that's the PMO competency framework, which is where this certification is rooted on. And I just, particularly as we mentioned about PMO management, we said that it doesn't include managing the team. What we did also recognise when we were doing the competency framework is that actually there is, it's not just PMO competences you need to be a good PMO person. There are 6 other potential kind of competence frameworks or reference that you might need within your role. So you will need to know some project management, some program management, change management, portfolio management, business analysis and leadership and management. And we took a deliberate decision not to reinvent those sets of competencies because they are well documented by other professional bodies. So within the competence framework, it says these are all of the PMO competences that complement some of the other competence frameworks that you will have. And again, in the competence framework, it tells you the various kind of combinations of those 6 other competence frameworks that you need to undertake your role. Now, what the PMO competence framework did was identify 4 different levels, so 4 different kind of levels of role. Now, we recognise there's lots of different job descriptions out there, but essentially most of them kind of fit. These are the 4 kind of common roles, so kind of 4 stratas of roles that we have in PMOs, and it wasn't just in the UK, it was across the globe. So we have the PMO administrator, the PMO analyst, the PMO manager, and then the PMO director. And what the House of PMO have done is they've written some certifications for anybody who's moving into any of these 4 roles. So they're called the House of PMO Essentials Suite of Products. We're here talking today about the PMO Director product, which is the very last one to be released. The Administrator, Analyst and Manager courses and certification are all currently live. And the PMO Director one went live just about 10 days, 2 weeks ago. So the actual kind of core texts that are used on the course, we use the House of PMO Competency Framework. We also use the PMO Service Catalogue that was written by Stuart Dixon. And we also use something called the Praxis Framework, which is, you can see there's a website reference there, www.praxisframework.org, which is a free to use project program and portfolio framework, which gives us some reference to some project management and program management theory. So all of these kind of textbooks are referenced, and it is worth saying that actually we don't provide the core text because you may well have already kind of purchased them, but all of the material that you need to pass the exam is in the course material. So we refer to the House of PMO Competency Framework, we refer to the Service Catalogue, we refer to Praxis, but actually the text that you need from each of those publications is actually in the core materials. So the workbook that you get for the course is enough to get you through the course and pass the exam, most importantly. So let's just talk a little bit about the rules, because one of the important things that we need to make sure is that people are attending the right course. Now that's for the benefit of all of the delegates, as well as for you yourself. So it's just to be clear about the 4 different rules, are to make sure that you're aiming yourself at the right course, or your team at the right course. So within the House of PMO Competency Framework, for each of the 4 rules, we developed a PMO role profile, which looked at the purpose of each role and then went into a little bit more detail about the key responsibilities, knowledge, skills, behaviours, and also, as I mentioned previously, what other competence frameworks would be required, and what level of competence would be required in the other frameworks for each of those roles. Now, just to be clear, in terms of just to make sure that everybody's happy that we kind of know the differentiation between each of those roles, here is the kind of the key purposes of each of those 4 roles. So it's always kind of quite interesting when kind of people start seeing this for the first time, as to kind of how much they kind of recognise their role overlaps. But that's something we do cover off on the course, in terms of where people see themselves doing multiple roles. So the PMO administrator, very much an entry-level role, an entry-level kind of job really to a large extent, but certainly an entry-level role into the world of project and program management and into PMO itself. So it's very much a kind of administration role, but actually sitting within a project and program context. Now, what we've found is lots of people were kind of going into that role and had not necessarily had any experience in projects and programs. So somebody would give them a risk register to maintain without necessarily explaining the context within which they were working. So the PMO administrator and the course that goes with it really kind of looks at kind of setting yourself up to kind of take all of your kind of work experience, your administration knowledge, your knowledge of the business, and say, well, actually, here's a bit of project and program knowledge that allows you to do a better job of being an administrator. The next level role is the PMO analyst. So an analyst has 2 key aspects to their role. Firstly, in terms of supporting the project and program manager in delivery of the projects. And again, depending on the role that you're playing as a PMO analyst, that could be the kind of mentor and guide to the project manager, or it could be somebody who's actually learning and supporting the project manager, with the project manager take the lead. It's very interesting in terms of the breadth of that role. But the PMO analyst does have a second element to their role, which is actually supporting the PMO manager rolling out new PMO initiatives. So that PMO initiatives could be a new service, a new report, a new way of doing risk management. So very much involved in the additional support of the PMO manager. Now, the PMO manager role, as we've got that there, and again, this came after kind of lots of discussions and try and kind of differentiate the roles. When we're talking about a PMO manager, that's very much aimed at individuals who are running a PMO. So they are held accountable for making sure that PMO is delivering the things that the PMO was set up to deliver. So that could be a project, program, or portfolio level, or it could actually indeed be centre of excellence. Now, the big step up between the PMO manager and the PMO director is that the PMO director may not even manage a PMO. Typically, they might manage the enterprise level PMO, but the PMO director's role is very much a case of looking and working with the organisation, typically at a senior level, who says, actually, I'm looking at the portfolio of change and I want to work with the senior executives, with the project and programme teams, and think, what's the best way of supplying the organisation with PMO capabilities. Are we going to have a single PMO office? Should we have 6 or 7 programme offices? Should we just have one big strategic programme office and then lots of little project offices for projects that get over a certain size? Do we want every PMO to have a bit of centre of excellence, or should that centre of excellence be at the very senior level and sit within the enterprise PMO? So essentially, you're head of the whole of the PMO function within your organisation. As I say, you may or may not run a PMO, but typically would run the enterprise PMO. So that's the PMO director. There is just a kind of little black box there in terms of both the PMO manager and the PMO director. What we're seeing more and more of now is that PMO managers and PMO directors may also have accountability for the delivery team. So they may be the line managers of project and program managers. Now, the important thing is that even though they're line managers of project and program managers, that doesn't mean they're accountable for the delivery of the projects, because that sits up through the project and program managers up to the relevant sponsors. So the purpose of the PMO director, as I said, is really about making sure that we've got the right PMO support across the organisation, focus in the right areas that actually leads the organisation to actually be able to deliver their strategy through an aligned portfolio of change. Now, we have broken that down. So again, just to kind of make sure we're on the right lines about the people who are coming on the course, we've listed 9 key responsibilities of the PMO director. So actually, the PMO director very typically doesn't just work with the executive team to look at what PMO is around. It's actually about how we control and manage the whole portfolio of change. So again, starting to work out, when is a project, when is a program as program, should these projects be delivered as programs, and actually work with the senior executive to facilitate the structure and the content of the portfolio, and making sure that we've got a vision and mission and strategy for the PMO that supports the delivery of that portfolio of change. So making sure that it's fully integrated and providing overall oversight, governance and insight to the initiatives and everything that kind of sits below that. Now, it's really interesting is that when we talk about the responsibilities, it's not just, it doesn't say provide a report, yes, which is very much kind of a very two-dimensional perspective. What we're really doing here at this level is understanding the business, understanding what's being delivered by change, and be able to provide real insight to the senior executives about what's happening on the projects and programs, what the implications of that be, and supporting the executives in making the choices and going through the options and the consequences of the different selections. So that kind of strategic oversight, governance and insight is a really kind of key element of the PMO director role. So we're also, in order to kind of ensure that we've got some ability to deliver the portfolio of change, typically the PMO director will also be involved in making sure that we've got the right capability and capacity to match what needs to be delivered by the organisation. And then on from that, we'll do the assurance activities to make sure that the governance frameworks that are in place, the capability and capacity processes that are in place to make sure that it's fit for purpose and has got the wherewithal to deliver, is actually kind of working. So puts in place a framework of assurance to make sure everything's working and make sure we've got the right leading indicators where things may not be going as anticipated. So as well as kind of looking at that kind of external and that kind of outward view, there's also very much an internal part of their role, kind of an inward looking about leading the whole PMO function. So that's making sure that we've got the right number of PMOs in the organisation, they've got the right level of funding and budgeting control, and making sure that anything we deliver is actually done effectively and efficiently. So there's very much kind of performance management of the overall PMO function sits within the PMO director's role. One of the things that kind of is very much embedded into the competency framework is values and behaviours, and so very much there to promote and nurture a culture that motivates excellence and collective individual performance. So this is really about actually kind of leading on the values and behaviours that actually kind of make successful project delivery part of the DNA of the organisation. So that's very much kind of working again with the senior team, but very much kind of leading that piece of role. And then finally, in terms of the final element, which kind of underpins things, but often we kind of see it as the big thing, but actually it's really just the framework that helps projects and programs succeed. So this is about kind of how we deliver projects and programs, what the various methodologies are that are about. And I think one of the important things that we do talk about at a PMO director level is actually not just kind of what do we currently use, but looking at what we could use and what's out there in the outside world, what are the latest developments, and how we're going to use them in our organisation. So that's how we define the PMO director role and the House of PMO competence frameworks. And obviously, if that's the setting, if that's the kind of the role that we're aiming at, then the course has been set up aimed at people who are aspiring, who are going to be moving into this role. So let's have a quick look at the course objectives, the structure, and the content. So I think first things first is to recognise that we don't just let anybody on the course. If you're going to be coming on the PMO director course, we want to make sure that you've had sufficient experience and that you know enough to be able to work with other people at this particular level. And it always sounds a bit prissy, and I know people want to kind of get ahead and kind of will do the director course. I might not be quite ready, but I think I'll find it useful. The important thing about having people at the right level on is about some of the exercises and some of the conversations we won't be able to fully contribute to. And as we've said right at the very beginning, when we looked at kind of who PMO Learning was, we are very interactive in our questions, and a lot of the learning is really in those conversations about what's involved in that role. And secondly, the other delegates on the course are looking forward to meet their peers. Typically, you're only going to have one PMO director in an organisation, and therefore meeting some other PMO directors who share some of the same challenges is one of the benefits of actually coming on a public course. So the prerequisites will be checked. We'll be running through them, and they're validated by APMG, who do the certification. So do make sure that you've got some of these prerequisites. If you haven't, if you get in touch with Charles, he can kind of walk you through perhaps how we can kind of work with you to achieve that. So the prerequisites, we've got a couple of things that are required. Firstly, if you've got your PMO manager's certification, that obviously kind of covers off all of the things up to this point, and we'll have done the validation at that of some of the things that you've got. If you haven't got your PMO manager's exam, what we're looking for is some practitioner certificate. So whether that be at a project management certificate, a program management certificate, or portfolio management. So it's really about having some kind of validation that you understand the concept of projects, programs, and portfolios, because we don't cover off that on the course. And then additionally to that, 3 years experience of working within a PMO or a project, program, or portfolio environment. Now, we recognise that some people who come into the PMO director's role haven't been a project or program manager. Often they might come in because they've had operational experience in the business, and they've perhaps been a senior user on a project, or they've been a sponsor of a project. Recognise how projects and programs can be can assist, how they're used in delivering the strategy of the organisation. They understand what PMOs need to do, but they've never necessarily done their own job. So we are seeing more people kind of come in at that top level, but we do believe it's important to have had some experience of working in that project context. So if you've been a sponsor, or you've kind of been involved in delivering a project, had not necessarily been the project manager, that's fine as well. But if you've got any problems with that, then do give us a ring and we can kind of talk you through that. Once you come on a course, the learning objectives of the course, we're not going to, in the 2 days of the course, turn you into the best PMO director in the world. Sorry, even us, we struggle to do that in 2 days. But what we will do in those 2 days is provide you with an oversight of the breadth and depth of the role of the PMO director, input some theory and help you understand kind of where that role is aimed at, where your focus should be, but also help you start thinking about, well, how am I going to develop in that role? What other kind of things do I need to go away and sharpen up on if I want to become competent in that role? So again, remember, it's the essentials for PMO directors. It's not this is every single thing you'll ever need to know about being a PMO director. So we cover off kind of 3 key things. We'll talk about kind of the context within the role. So whereabout is the focus of the PMO director? What do we spend our day doing? Who's our kind of key stakeholders? We then talk about the 4 key roles and just put that in context in terms of the relationship you might have with those other 3 roles. And then we'll walk you through some of the key competences that are required to successfully undertake the role of the PMO director. And after the course, and again, things have changed in the virtual world. You don't do the exam on the course. You get an opportunity to book that exam at a time that suits you after the course is completed. Now, it's a 60-minute exam. There are 50 questions to answer. Now, that's over a minute a question. So for some of you who might have recognised some of the previous certifications that I've gone through, that's quite a long time to answer some of the questions because they are a little bit more in depth because we're now at director level. So there's a 50% pass mark required, so you need to get 25 of those questions correct, and it is a closed book exam, so it all has to be in your head before you sit the exam and in order to pass. And the idea is that if you are successful in your exam, that you will have demonstrated that you've got sufficient knowledge and understanding to undertake the role of the PMO director. So it's really kind of saying, well, actually, I understand that role and I'm ready to kind of step into it. As I say, it's not if you've been doing the PMO director role for 7 or 8 years and want to say, well, actually, I want somebody to stamp my forehead and say, yes, I am a kind of fully functioning PMO director. It's very much the essentials moving into that director role. So, as I said, it's a 2-day course. Day 1, we do introductions, quick refresher of some key concepts that you may not necessarily have come across that are covered in the competency framework and the service catalogue. And we then go on to the examinable parts of the course, which is the roles, specifically the role of the PMO director, the PMO in context, and this delivery support competence. And then day 2, we look at those PMO enabling competences. So let's just kind of go through in a little bit more detail in terms of what each of those sections are in the course. So firstly is the refresher of key concepts. So again, this might be, it may just be a refresher. You may actually kind of be learning it for the first time. It's non-examinable, but it's some important concepts that you need to be able to understand in order for the rest of the course to make sense. So we'll talk about the different types of PMO. We'll talk about this whole concept of a service-based PMO, what those services are, and any key documentation that is related to those services. We'll talk about the PMO life cycle and what's involved in each of those life cycles. So as a PMO director, you potentially are going to be initiating new PMOs. You may be also initiating the close of a PMO, so understanding that overall PMO life cycle and understand the PMO context. So kind of where in your role do you sit within the PMO and where does that sit in the rest of the organisation? So the 4 roles we've covered off. As I said, we go into the PMO director role in a little bit more detail. We've covered off the purpose and the key responsibilities, and we do spend some time looking at the knowledge, skills and behaviours you will need to be effective. Now, the idea is that on this course, on the 2-day course, We can't teach you all of the skills. We will talk about kind of what knowledge and skills you will have accrued in your working career to date and how they can be repurposed because they're transferable into that PMO role. And a key element of the conversation will be appropriate behaviours that we need to display in order to be effective, particularly as we want to kind of lead and promote this culture of project and programme management excellence. And we go on to the PMO context in a little bit more detail here. So this is about understanding where our role fits in. So we talk about the vision, mission and strategy of the organisation. We also talk about the vision, mission and strategy of the PMO and the PMO structure that we're going to work within. We'll talk about overall capability and maturity of the organisation in terms of delivering project and programme management. And we'll also talk about this concept of the integrated PMO model. So this is where, rather than just having a single PMO, we'll have multiple PMOs across the organisation. And we'll talk about what the implications are and how to give some hints and tips on the design of that. And that's a really kind of interesting discussion in terms of kind of some of the factors that feed into the overall design, apart from the fact that it's always individual to an organisation, because no two organisations have got the same portfolio of change or governance structure that already exists in their organisation. We'll then talk about PMO success. That's both in the individual PMOs that you initiate, but also the overall PMO function and what that looks like. And then we'll also talk about putting in place a kind of a PMO roadmap in terms of understanding where we are now in terms of your PMO function, but also in terms of how you look to improve and change your PMO function as the organisation changes, as the portfolio starts getting developed, and as the portfolio changes its structure and content. And then we go on to the PMO delivery support competence. And I haven't produced the materials. It's really interesting. Keep getting the questions. But surely as a PMO director, you're not doing delivery support. Surely that's the admin and the administrator. It's just a director level. We're still doing support. It's just a slightly different level of support. And what we're doing here is supporting the key decision makers in the organisation. Typically, as we've already mentioned when we talked about the responsibilities, what goes in the portfolio of change, where are we in terms of capability and capacity? Are we in a position where we can take on all of those projects and programs? What are the kind of the key risks associated with that? So we're still, even at director level, still involved in supporting the business, supporting the senior executive. So we cover off, as we do for the competencies, the definition and description of the competence. And again, it's about recognising, what does this mean for the director? Any kind of key terms and artifacts that are related to the competence. And again, we try to be here method independent. So there'll be words from PMI, there'll be words from Prince2, P3O, the Axelos products, there'll be things from Praxis. So we recognise there are lots of different kind of terms. And again, it's just about trying to make us multilingual when it comes to the different methods and terminologies that are out there. And then the last bit we cover off with the delivery support element is actually looking at the potential services that are going to be required by your organisation that might need you to be have a level of competence in this particular competency. So that's the kind of the structure. And then day two, we look at all of those three elements again. But we then go into a little bit more detail about capacity management. So how do we work in the organisation to balance supply with demand? So we've got this portfolio of change. How do we work with kind of HR and the other functions of the organisation to make sure that we can deliver everything that is required? Capability development, which I know is kind of very similar, but it is really different. So this is about how do we have the right skills in the organisation, the right level of skills and experience to deliver the level of complexity of the projects and programmes that we've got to deliver. Assurance is how do we provide confidence to all of the key stakeholders that things are being delivered and being delivered well, and that actually we are going to end up with all of the outcomes and benefits that are anticipated. And the governance competence is about how do we put in place the right structure for decision making around those projects and programs to make sure that people who do need to make decisions are in the right place and have all of the information that's required. So that's really kind of the structure of the course. It's 2 days, very much understanding of the role, and then talking about some of the specific competencies that will help you to deliver that role well. So, any questions or comments that you might want to add? Has that clarified what you anticipated in a PMO director's course over 2 days? Ideally, if we were going to talk about everything, it would probably take a number of weeks, if not months, to cover everything. But it really is that kind of just tip of the iceberg of things that you'll need to cover from a PMO director's perspective. No questions. Charles, can I just ask you to put your contact details in chat, please?
Yep.
Charles is our salesperson, so if you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch with Charles. Our next scheduled course, it says that as if we've delivered it before, our first scheduled running of the Essentials for PMO Directors is on the schedule on the 14th and 15th of November. You can find that on our website, as I say, or contact Charles. If you've kind of sat and listened through this and just said, well, actually, I thought that was the course I wanted, but it isn't. There are some other courses. This is our kind of up and coming schedule. We've got the Essentials for PMO Managers taking place the 3rd, 5th of August. We've got the Essentials for PMO Administrators, so perhaps somebody in your team on the administrator course between the 17th and 19th of October. And we've got the Lean Agile course taking place on the 19th and 20th of October. Just another quick reminder as well is that if you've got a selection of people in your organisation who want to be trained, you don't need to send them on a public course. We can come to you both physically and virtually. So if you want to deliver an internal course, all of the courses that you see on our website are available for in-house delivery. Once you've been on the course, we do really care that you get something practical out of it, and a number of people might actually need some further input after the course. So they are chargeable services. We don't, much as we kind of would love to, we do need to keep ourselves a viable business, but we do provide 2 things. We can put you in touch with one of our consultants who, if you want some additional support in embedding some of the aspects that you've heard about on the course, we can do that. Alternatively, if it's just for some support for you, we do provide some one-to-one coaching, details of which can be found on the website. So thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you found it helpful. Our contact details are there on the course. If you want to be a bit more personal, Charles has put his detail in the chat. Thank you very much for being with us, and hopefully we'll see you on a course soon.